Hello, everyone. I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express, where we discuss developments in our neighborhood that impact India. Today, as US President Donald Trump's tit for tat, utterly petty tariff imposition ignites an ugly worldwide trade war, and a very interesting pause as well. Here at Global Express, we're going to revisit Prime Minister Narendra Modi's very calculated move to shore up India's geopolitical standing in the region. It wasn't just the Andaman and Nicobar Gulf of Thailand land bridge that Modi signed on to at BIMSTEC. He gave the Bangladeshi leader Mohammed Yunus a green signal to reappoint a new high commissioner to Delhi and flexed India's muscles by scrapping the transshipment facility that had allowed Dhaka to export goods through India to Europe and West Asia. Before that, he gave his blessing to a secret meeting between India and Taliban officials in Dubai. The hateful misogyny apart, India is moving to secure its western and its eastern flank. But it's the highly vulnerable southern coastline that Delhi is concerned about. Navigating the choppy Pak Strait and the Indian Ocean cannot be done solo. India needs Sri Lanka. So the most intriguing development, therefore, is that for now, the new man in Colombo, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, one of India's biggest critics, is willing to play ball. On Modi's landmark visit, there was pomp, ceremony, the highest civilian award, 7 big-ticket agreements on defense, power, energy, bilateral connectivity, a pipeline, even talk of restructuring Sri Lanka's debt. So are we seeing the first part of a grand strategy unfold, turning Colombo, once Pakistan's and by extension China's ally, into New Delhi's newest partner? When did this shift happen? Delhi's unlikeliest of partners is the ruling party in Sri Lanka, the Janata Vimukthi Peramuna, part of the National People's Power government led by President Dissanayake, a party that at its inception spewed anti-India venom from the time Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, at the behest of the then Sri Lankan President Julius Jayawardene, deployed the Indian peacekeeping forces to Sri Lanka to curb not just the Tamil insurgency, but the Sinhala militancy as well in 1987, and tragically paid the ultimate price for that intervention. So India-Sri Lanka relations have been anything but smooth. There's a long-standing mistrust. The India leading Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Rajapaksas adept at playing both sides, Maithripala Sirisena doing the same. The persistent line has always been that India is a big bully, that its big brother attitude still sees its neighbors, particularly Sri Lanka, as minnows. And has that changed? Because has India realized the importance of talking to all sides in the game? It definitely is happening in Sri Lanka. Namal Rajapaksa was invited to a conclave in New Delhi, and both Sajat Premadasa and Ranil Wickremesinghe have been kept on Delhi's right side. Mr. Modi himself says Delhi has a very special place for Sri Lanka in India's neighborhood first policy. He's talked up this Vision Mahasagar. But then again, the first vertical sea lift bridge on the Pamban coast across the Park Strait, connecting Rameshwaram to the Indian mainland, did hit a glitch, a portent of what's to come. So, unraveling Sri Lanka, India's freshly minted teardrop diplomacy, as they call it, are 3 very special guests. Long-standing veteran journalist Nirupama Subramanian covered Sri Lanka from the inside in the pivotal years from 1996 to 2002. She's covered Pakistan, Afghanistan, a host of other countries, as well as written for leading newspapers in the country. She writes extensively now on India's foreign policy and national security and understands the region like few others. Welcome, Ms. Nirupama Subramanian.
Thank you, Neena. Thank you so much.
Also with us is Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, a Sri Lankan academic, geopolitics and foreign policy analyst, political columnist and author. He's senior fellow at the Millennium Project in Washington, D.C., founding director general of the Institute of National Security Studies in Sri Lanka. He's also the former executive director of the Lakshman Kadurgama Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies. Welcome, Mr. Abeyagoonasekera. And last but not least, Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka. He's a Sri Lankan academic, scholar, diplomat, writer, author, and politician. The Sri Lanka's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary to the Russian Federation. to France, Spain, and Portugal. He was also permanent representative to the United Nations at Geneva and served in the ILO and the HRC. Welcome, Dr. Jayatilleka.
Thank you, Neena. Very happy to see old friends here, Nirupama and Asanga, and great to be on your show. Sorry about the techno glitch.
Thank you. Visual, yes. Now, for the first question, let's start with you, Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka. You've quoted President Anura Kumara Dissanayake as trashing an MOU on defense that then President Ranil Wickremesinghe signed with India. You said Anura has been quoted as saying it will give Sri Lanka no political or economic room to take independent decisions. But less than 2 years later, now you say that you are questioning the fact that the new president, AKD, who in fact stayed home to put in the roll out the welcome mat for Modi, has done exactly the same thing. He's signed not one, but 7 agreements, including an MOU on defense. You've raised questions on why the MOU isn't in the public domain. You've said that it will pull Sri Lanka into India's orbit, restrict its foreign policy choices, and expand India's footprint in Sri Lanka. So why has the JVP, which once saw India as this expansionist power, done something, taken such a 360-degree turn, actually?
Well, the JVP was founded 60 years ago, and one of the founding or foundational lectures was on Indian expansionism. But I think we have to draw the distinction between the history of the JVP, the origin story, and the violence of the 1980s, because many political parties and movements outgrow their origins and their violent pasts and focus on the more recent conversion. As you quite rightly said, Neena, I've quoted from one of his public speeches in August 2023, precisely about what formed the skeleton of the 7 agreements that he had just signed. That was the joint statement between visiting Prime Minister, President at that time, elected by the Parliament, Ranil Wickremesinghe, to India. And there was a robust public criticism by Anura Kumara Dissanayake, which lasted throughout his presidential election campaign in 2024, as well as the parliamentary election campaign of his party.
What is it that makes Sri Lankans, Sri Lankan intellectuals uneasy about this visit? It is as Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka has written, he's calling it a sellout. And he says this kind of integration of Sri Lanka with India is unacceptable. What is it that comes to your mind when you see this? Because he was given a grand welcome at the Independence Square and given that award, which only Yasser Arafat, Gayub asked.
I think it's a challenge, for any small country to live in the shadow of a big country. And I think it's not just with Sri Lanka that we see it. We see it with all our neighbors. We see it with Nepal. We see it with Bangladesh. We see it with Maldives, Sri Lanka. And of course, with Pakistan, we have big other issues. So that's a separate relationship. But with all these smaller countries in the region, we have both a desire to benefit from India, as well as this fear that that India may play big brother or is a bully in the region, has tendencies, all those things. So there's a little bit of a contradictory, if you call it, contradictory feelings running through this whole story. So same with Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was very happy to receive Indian financial assistance during the economic meltdown. India was the first responder. Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Mahinda Rajapaksa's closest friends in Beijing were not available to them at that point. And but even at that time, when when India poured in $4 billion as financial assistance, people were saying, look,
That's right.
we appreciate this as assistance, but we don't want you inside Sri Lanka. We don't want you to take over Sri Lanka. So at that time, if you notice, all the quid pro quos, as if you can call them that, were seen with great skepticism. The Trincomalee oil tank farm deal, and many other deals at that time, they were seen as India extracting its pound of flesh for the money that it had given. So the defense cooperation is, an extreme example of this, because people
That's
have.
right. I agree with that. I mean, the fact that across the neighborhood, we are seen as, as a big brother who, but in this case with Sri Lanka, Dr. Asanga, if I could come to you, the defense deal. So the last time there was a defense deal, so to speak, when the IPKF were deployed, they were a target of the JVP and Tamil IR. So this time, when there is it looks as if, I mean, even though nothing has been made public about the MOU, if there is an Indian military by China or Pakistan, or even other Sri Lankan groups that led the front line, like the Frontline Socialist Party, which led the Aragalia, it has. What do you have to say about that, Dr. Asanga, Abeyagoonasekera?
Yeah, I think basically there's two parts to your question. One is the 1987, where the Indo-Lanka Accord was signed, and 60,000 JVP lives were lost. And this is what Dr. Dayan mentioned, their early ideology of against the Indian expansionism. What you have today is of course, a historical agreement, which is a defense cooperation agreement, because we have never had a defense cooperation agreement before with India. So while it is historic, the process, there is a huge, there's a lot of questions raised by civil society as well as parliamentarians about the process of how it was done. What we got wrong was in 1987 was again the process. It was not tabled in the parliament. It was not discussed, widely discussed, the 13th Amendment. And so there was lack of transparency at that time. And there is lack of transparency now. Now, my concern is that not many Sri Lankans, as well as the Indians, know that Sri Lanka has a cabinet-approved or government-approved defense policy. We have a national defense policy, which was approved in 2019. November 11th. So now there's a serious concern. 2 weeks ago, I was in Colombo, whether the DCA, the National Defense Policy, NDP, basically, tallies with the DCA, which is the Defense Cooperation Agreement. So some of the clauses, whether it has a sort of, whether it has referred the Sri Lanka's national defense policy, and whether it sort of respects what is written on the national defense policy. Now, if it doesn't, then we are back again to square one, where a process has to be looked at before signing these agreements. Because now none of the Sri Lankans have seen this agreement, as well as people are asking what is the content of this. So India, I mean, you're back again to the same, old process of doing it. You need to do it right. Exactly. So now I understand that this is years of work, which is a lot of people refer to the Colombo Security Conclave, but it is beyond. You see, the national, the Defense Cooperation Agreement, which we signed, basically goes beyond that. Even in 2019, we had defense dialogues about, having a structured mechanism for all these, a more structured approach. While this is important, because what happens is when India and Sri Lanka, every time Sri Lanka gets into some sort of a security measure, we sort of attend it one by one. So we kind of, for example, the Chinese submarines or the maritime research vessels. So it's kind of a very ad hoc. So having something structured is better than not structured, but doing it right is the way forward. But does it sort of affect
But
the Sri Lanka?
the issue that there are touchy issues also during this visit, but not touched, like Kachatibu, for instance, the arrest of the Indian fishermen, Tamil fishermen, So the question that I wanted to ask Nirupama is basically whether India will be able to separate the domestic issue of Indian Tamil fishermen being caught fishing in Sri Lankan waters, and the bigger issue that India is playing to I think, a larger playbook. It's scoring points in Tamil Nadu in a local sense. It's scoring points in Tamil Nadu for getting the fishermen released, but it's also taking control of international waters, working in tandem with Sri Lanka to ensure that, as you rightly said, Dr. Asanga, when the Chinese come calling, whether that will actually stop Sri Lanka from doing that in the future.
So the fisherman thing it's a long-standing battle between the fishing communities on both sides of the Pork Strait, and there is no solution in sight except to manage expectations on both sides politically. And there is an election coming up in Tamil Nadu next year, and I think Prime Minister Modi was really speaking to that when he said, let us have a more humane approach. Now, I mean, Sri Lankan fishermen could also argue for a humane approach to their livelihoods by the Tamil Nadu side, because it is the Tamil Nadu fishermen that encroach regularly into their waters, tear their nets, and create chaos and havoc to their livelihoods. That is separate. I just think you said that they have taken control of the international waters around India and Sri Lanka. I think we are pitching things a little far ahead of where they are right now. Hey, listen, this is a memorandum of understanding on defense cooperation. Memorandums of understanding are signed dime a dozen all over the place. And these are not legally binding agreements, and Sri Lanka knows that.
It's not enforceable.
It is not legally enforceable. It is not like the India-Sri Lanka agreement, which is legally vetted, signed by both sides. It was, the terms of the agreement were out there. Of course, it had much more than the IPKF in it. But still, I think an MOU is an MOU and an agreement is an agreement, and you have to see these two things separately. What it means is that it gives Sri Lanka a little leeway to decide what it wants to do and what it need not do. I think the initiative lies with Sri Lanka. What it contains, my understanding of what the defense cooperation contains, this MOU contains, is what is already happening. The maritime defense exercises, training,
I hope
capacity building, and so on and so forth. So I don't think there's anything in it that is new except for defense production, which maybe Sri Lanka would benefit by if it ever happens. If there is an industry in Sri Lanka making defense hardware, maybe that's something. But I don't know. I will leave it to Dr. Dayan and Asanga to elaborate on these things. But these are the points I wanted to make.
Yeah, Doctor, I will let me bring in Dr. Dayan, because I've been dying to hear what he has to say. For Sri Lanka, basically, this is an alliance with India, which is why is it not seen as a better option, Dr. Dayan, than a deal with China? What did Beijing bring to the table that Colombo, embraced so heartily, so many times over? But what has China actually done for Sri Lanka? So could you give us specifics? Because a deal with China has never set off the kind of ill feeling that it has with India. Is it, as you've written, about Colombo feeling it's not treated as an equal by New Delhi, that it's a junior partner and not a strategic ally. And don't you think that has changed? Because Anura Dissanayake is not somebody who looks as if he's going to play, the junior partner.
Well, I
Dr.
think
Dayan?
that the Indian footprint is not right size. One has to understand, and this is where I feel very sad that old academic friends of mine who are experts on Sri Lanka, like Professor Urmila Fadnis, are not there, they're dead. Because the old-time academics, the Sri Lankanologists, would have pointed out that the island, as islands usually do, has a certain ethos. And that ethos is one that values its autonomous identity. So that means that the relationship with India has a complex character. On the one hand, there's so much in common, and on the other hand, that's precisely why the island leans away in order to assert its cultural, civilizational, and political identity. So I think that the present set of agreements is a little too heavy. It's too much for the traffic to bear. There's something also wrong in the Sherlock Holmesian sense of the dog that didn't bark. Now, why isn't President Anura Dissanayake saying, hey, my fellow Sri Lankans, look what I've got for you. I've got 7 agreements with our very rich neighbor. And here they are. And this is an election season. It's a season of local government or local authorities elections in May. Why is he saying, and why are his ministers saying, you want to know what's in it? Go file your right to information application. Now that's very odd. Why? Because he probably thinks or knows that there's something in it somewhere that will raise hackles. Now, I don't know what that is, but I ask myself, why is he dodging? Why is he hiding it? Why are they so tight-lipped about it? Why are there no leaks? Now, when it came to the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord, there was this famous press conference shortly after it was signed, where NRAM, Kadri Ismail, a whole room full, there was standing room only, of journalists, Sri Lankan, Indian, Western, the BBC guy, Chris Morris, I think it was, peppered President Jayawardena and Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi with questions on the most detailed aspects of the accord, such as the merger, the temporary merger of 2 provinces. But here, there's a deathly silence, and that tells the Sri Lankan citizens that, this guy is nervous to tell us what he actually signed. I think it's because of what he himself had been saying, and I don't mean back in 87, but I mean in 2023, 2024, against the Ranil Wickremesinghe joint statement and memoranda of understanding. It's exactly what he had signed, or rather fleshed out. That was skeletal. This is fleshed out. It's also multidimensional. You've got connectivity, energy connectivity, pipeline, all kinds of stuff. It's probably a mega package. Now, you ask me about China. We've never signed a defense cooperation agreement with China. We've never signed, our defense agreements are what I call thin agreements, not thick like this one. We have agreements with everybody. We've trained with everybody. The Pakistanis, because the West cut us off, the British certainly, during the war. But we trained in the United States, we trained in China, we got equipment wherever we could. So we have a kind of omnidirectional outreach. We'll take whatever we can from whoever we can, and we are happy to do that. But this is kind of integrating us, locking us in. And if I may change the metaphor from footprint to something else, it's beginning to feel a bit like a straitjacket. And islands don't like being told who they can be friendly with and who they can't be friendly with, especially the Chinese. Since they're not our neighbor, we haven't had that kind of checkered history.
That's exactly what I was getting to. Will that defense...
I mean, Chinese
Yeah, that's exactly what I've
war,
asked. That's exactly what my question is.
during the 30-year war, the Chinese helped us staunchly. India naturally had certain constraints and compulsions from Tamil Nadu. There are things that India could not do, and there are things that India could not be seen to do. However friendly the government was. Now, President Kumaratunga, I think Nirupama knows this story well because she wrote it up for the Hindu. President Kumaratunga said, and later denied that she said, that she was very disappointed that India didn't help us out at the hour of maximum danger when the Tigers had forced the Sri Lankan army to retreat from the Elephant Pass camp, which was a strategic camp, and were marching on Jaffna.
Yeah.
Our iconic Foreign Minister Lakshman Khadargaman was in Delhi for minor surgery, I think, and he spoke at the highest levels, and he was told, "Sorry, Lakshman, we can't do that. By the way, why don't you talk to the Israelis?" So it was a shock to President Kumaratunga because she had out on a limb and she had sincerely promised augmented devolution for the Tamil people, unlike Mahinda Rajapaksa later, and even Javadana, who was somewhat tight-fisted. And yet, India did not help. But the Chinese did. So did the Pakistanis. But let's say that was straightforward competition. But the Chinese were staunch friends. That's the advantage the Chinese have, and the Sri Lankans tend to be a little sentimental. They would not like to be told that they have to be married to India and, can't have the kind of free and easy island relationships that they used to have.
Okay, so that's very interesting because I was wondering why that in the recent past where India has stepped up, as Nirupama has said, with and now it's offering almost an economic bailout, because during the COVID there were medicines sent in, there was there was tourism industry which took a big hit, was wooed back. Mostly Indian tourists were wooed back in. So India stepped in, offered free medicines, gave that $4 million bailout, and has just written off a $100 million loan. So I think India is making an effort to win friends in its immediate region, particularly Sri Lanka. So if I can get to you, Dr. Asanga, would you just tell me about, why is it that President Dissanayake would make such a huge promise? I mean, obviously the promise saying that he would not allow Sri Lankan territory to be used against India. Will that affect Chinese submarines docking at Sri Lankan ports? I mean, I did ask this question before, but do you think it's going to have that impact? And what happens to the Chinese investment in Hambantota in Colombo port? Are these all, going to have be given a fresh look, or will they just continue?
I think clearly this agreement is coming at a time where actually working on capturing data in South and Southeast Asia on regional diplomacy carried out by India and China. What I find from my data is that India's regional diplomacy is quite weak in its neighborhood, Bangladesh, Nepal, Maldives, Sri Lanka, as well as in the East, Southeast, East Asian countries. While China have sort of a momentum in terms of trade, in terms of massive amounts of trade, actually, if you look at from Thailand and China, 120 billion. So they're numbers that you can't even, and India and Thailand's about 20 to 30 around there. So they're large numbers. India knows this. There is a security side as well as a kind of a Chinese, I would say, an expansions kind of in the Indian Ocean that India sees because of the maritime capacity and capability that is been built by China, is seen as the sort of a security threat, where India, wish to sort of be the net security provider of the region. And these agreements India sees that it would assist. But I agree with Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka's sort of assessment, because the amount of the pressure that island nations that we'd have to calibrate on bringing an equilibrium on our foreign policy, which we have a non-aligned doctrine to sort of, that's the foreign policy of Sri Lanka on a non-aligned basis. So how do we achieve this balance is the most important thing. So your question on Chinese research vessels or Hambantota, or I don't think that these agreements would sort of minimize the Chinese influence. This would aggravate more, because I was told when I was writing The Conundrum of an Island, my previous book, by a Chinese official, that don't disappoint us if we bring agreements. You can sign with the United States. This is about the SOFA, the Status Force Agreement. When I asked these questions from diplomat, they said, no, you can sign with everybody, then we have no problem, but don't disappoint us when we bring agreements. So it's the fact is that we have opened a door basically for MOUs, defense MOUs. And that's why I mentioned that Anura Kumara, he's new for governance and all that. He's seen as a pragmatic leader, a reformist leader, but his reforms need to sort of respect his own political ideology, which is the hardcore JVPers were talking about, which is to preserve the sovereignty of the country and territorial integrity. So those are very important areas, but I don't see that China would be affected by this, clearly.
That's very interesting. Nirupama, if I can come back to you, this whole pro-India tilt has been talked about by Anura Dissanayake. It sort of meets the Prime Minister's Vision Mahasagar plan that he announced in Mauritius just weeks ago. It's obviously an extension of that agreement to to make it's a strategic move, I think, to get the Indian Ocean region, sort of secure and give more importance to maritime security and strategic partnerships with countries in the global south, like now Sri Lanka. And do you think that actually is a workable plan, or is it just a lot of hot air?
So I think it's already a plan that is in action. There's something called the Colombo Security Conclave, and these countries have been talking to each other as part of the Colombo Security Conclave. And it flows from the earlier Indian initiative, which is Sagar. So there isn't, my contention is that there isn't anything new in it. There isn't anything that we already don't know about how these countries are cooperating with each other. Last year, if you recall, India and Sri Lanka inaugurated a maritime rescue coordination center and coordination center in Colombo. It was the whole thing was set up by Bharat Electronics. There was a lot of outrage in Sri Lanka against that MRCC, but it went ahead, and there it is. And it actually links the Sri Lankan Navy to the Indian Navy in these rescue operations, rescue and search operations. So there's a lot of linkage already. India has provided 2 Dornier aircraft, which is the first time, they've done this. Even during the war, they did not give any aircraft, nothing, no lethal supplies. All the aircraft, as Dr. Jayatilleka mentioned, everything came from China. Supplies came from Pakistan, small arms, and the Chinese sent boats and airplanes. So all this is new for India as well, but all this is happening already. So there's a lot of defense cooperation going on besides the old traditional training for officers in Delhi and in Wellington.
Indian Navy and that's true. The Indian Navy and the Indian Army have traditionally trained Sri Lankan Navy and Sri Lankan soldiers.
So to answer your question, it's not hot air, but it is not bigger than what it is. I'm saying that let us not exaggerate what it is. It is not a complete integration of our armed forces. It is not a complete integration of our security systems. I don't think it's anything of the sort. It is something. I think it is putting on paper what there already is, and as one of the officials mentioned, it brings all that together under an umbrella framework. But I'm also
Yes,
I'm also suspicious, not suspicious. I'm also skeptical about
skeptical.
the word framework, because the MOU, as I said, there have been many MOUs with Sri Lanka. I mean, the Trincomalee oil tank farm has seen, I don't know how many MOUs since 2000, and they still had to sign another MOU for it. This is a surprising thing for me, that
Oh, really?
in 2022 or 2022, they formed a company, everything, and again, they have an MOU. So, MOUs don't, what I want to say is MOUs don't really mean anything.
That's very interesting. Dr. Jayatilleka, if I can come back to you, that's very interesting what Asanga said about who and what AKD is, because they have a very strong pro-Marxist, pro-China leader and ideologue in this Bimal Ratnayaka. But then you also have Vijita Herat, who's middle of the road, like obviously AKD is turning into. I mean, that's one aspect of it, because I mean, this is the new thinking that has driven, as you have written very beautifully, that driven the Rajapaksas and the Vikramasinghes out of the the political heart of the country. But can can it be reversed? Is it, with what you're talking about? Is that the anger? Is it just restricted to people like you, or is it a wider feel in Sri Lanka? Then could it actually hurt the NPP?
Well, it's not anger, but even staunch supporters of the NPP are very concerned about the lack of transparency. And that's a first. You make a huge fuss about a visiting leader. You honor him in a manner that nobody else has. I mean, Premier Zhou Enlai was not welcomed at Independence Square in 1957, nor was Xi Jinping by Mahinda Rajapaksa decades later. So you give a kind of a unique status to Prime Minister Modi, which is hype. You hype things up, and then you don't tell people what you signed, and you maintain that silence for days. It's been days since
So we
signing
can't.
of the accords.
You're, I
So
think,
that's suspicious.
expecting. If I can just interrupt, if we expecting another Aragalia, I think would
No,
be
no, 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 no. If there is another
that would
Aragalia,
not happen.
if there is another Aragalia, it will not be because of the MOUs or defense pact with India, though that might be an ingredient. It will be because of the agreements with IMF, which Anura did not revise, as he said he would before he was elected.
That's right.
And the agreements with the private creditors, which also he decried, but just went ahead with what Ranil Wickremesinghe had agreed to. So it will be because of the economic crunch compounded by what President Trump is doing and the volatility in the global economy. It'll be mainly economic, because all the statistics, the government statistics, the UN agency statistics show an unprecedented plummeting of living standards of the majority of people. Now, it is in that
Nirupama
context,
brought up a very interesting point about Trincomalee and the
yeah.
fact that that turning it into this this, I mean, it is the second deepest port apparently in the world after Sydney. So, but turning it into an energy and oil hub has got alongside the United Arab Emirates, has also got a whole load of other ramifications, because it means that it's very clear that India has a great comfort level with Abu Dhabi. I mean, which for a long time, the Abu Dhabi Ports Group and the ADNOC. But does the Indian Oil Corporation have the same kind of comfort level with the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation? Because I mean, I hear that even in the past, the Tatas came very close to signing a deal that didn't happen. There are, I mean, and what is going to be said about what is going to happen in Trinco sounds very, very interesting. It says it's talking about giving Sri Lanka energy security, but it's also talking about storing Indian oil in these, storage bins, and and so is India taking over a very critical asset in Sri Lanka? I mean, is this joint venture between Abu Dhabi and IOC and CPC, will it help Sri Lanka, boost Sri Lanka as a energy hub, and at the same time also help India, because if you're going to have a direct pipeline, a tank farm, and a new refinery, that's a completely different ballgame.
I think that's the problem, because the Sri Lankans, including President Jayawardena, who signed the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord, didn't really activate that section, the annexures to the Accord, which had to do with the Trincomalee tank farm. Trincomalee is seen as a kind of a jewel in the crown. So every leader has been loath to allow India or anybody else. They'd much rather keep it in the attic or, in the barn, rather than allow an intrusive presence. And there's also I'm afraid, the ethno-economic factor. Trincomalee is located in the eastern province, and the northeast is preponderantly, in linguistic terms, Tamil-speaking. What we have is a geostrategic sort of particular configuration. The northeastern cone of the island of Sri Lanka abuts the southern cone of India, which is where you have a Tamil sort of ethnic kin state, which means that most of the Sri Lankans, who happen to be Sinhalese, view things in Trincomalee with greater wariness than they would if it was just like any other part of the island. So I just want to share one thing with you. I've noticed that islands, not only Sri Lanka, but islands, if they are somehow overcommitted, if one leader signs too many agreements with a large country, then people start looking for the exits. And then it starts again. So it happened with the Accord. You extricate yourself, either that administration or the next guy who comes down the pike says, I will exercise my exit clause. And then he or she would take you out. And then again, you come back to the geopolitical reality of having India as your neighbor. So it's a kind of a to and fro. You need to be flexible and make for certain fluidity. I'm afraid that this set of agreements, all this Big Bang approach, we've never had this Big Bang approach before with any country. I don't think it's the right way of doing things. It doesn't understand not so much the sensitivities, but the sensibility of our neighboring small state, which happens to be an island.
That's very interesting. That is really curious. Dr. Asanga, if I could bring you in, do you have a comment to make on the fact that Trinco, I mean, the fact is that these 100 tank farms have been lying empty forever. We don't know whether they're going to become functional and how long that will take. But there's also another interesting aspect, which is connecting the power grids of India and Sri Lanka, just as Bangladesh and India did. So, and then they're talking about cooperation on digital infrastructure. That's basically, I suppose, to bring in India's, this identity cards, either Aadhaar cards. But more than that, I was also taken with Dr. Dayan's comment about the linguistic, the fact that we share a linguistic, shared linguistics with the Tamil Northeast. We haven't this entire visit sort of skirted around the north completely, didn't it? I mean, it talked about, of course, they talked about Rameshwaram and the bridge and all that, but it didn't really bring up the 13th Amendment, which has always been sort of a sticking point with Sri Lanka.
Yeah, Neena. So I think clearly the bridge project in the defense establishment, I did some interviews. They don't speak about this administration does not speak much about the bridge project, the physical bridge connecting India and Sri Lanka. When it comes to Trincomalee, I think the initial the energy, building the energy corridor, the initial mistake was done by Adani. Because what Anura Kumara Dissanayake pointed out, the process and its weakness. So kind of revisiting the Adani project back again. But then the wind farms, which was, the wind project, which was cancelled or terminated from the Chinese and given to the Indians, was another strategic miscalculation. Because wind farms don't sort of create national security threats. I mentioned this earlier when some of the strategic, I would say, thinkers were in Delhi got it wrong. Wind farms are just power plants, which gives natural energy. Then when it comes to the maritime, research vessels that was coming into the country, the Chinese MSR vessels, then they mentioned that there's a national security threat again to India. But we fail to say what are the equipments. Now, the equipments are known, the equipment list is given, is known. It is also known to the United States also. So I think we need to show what are the threat, where is the threat coming from, rather than just saying, okay, this is a national security threat, so that's why we. So even on the Trincomalee, now this is a very sensitive, because geopolitically it's very important, geostrategically it's an important harbor for Sri Lanka.
Absolutely.
And you're making a direct energy corridor or energy connection to India. So the ultra-nationalists, I mean, if you listen to the comments that's been going on in Sri Lanka, they have a point, which is India is geoeconomically taking an advantage to achieve geostrategic means. Now, how strong will it?
Well put.
Yeah, how strong will it be with an hidden agreement? What Dr. Dayan was saying, the process, and it's missing. Now, quickly, the RTI, I saw one message from Foreign Minister, which was a very positive one, saying that the RTI will be, from the RTI, the right to information, we will give access. I don't know how true that is, but it was on a newspaper the morning. But this is really important. You need to sort of communicate this, especially on the Trincomalee, because Chinese, remember, has also given 3.7 billion for an oil refinery in Hambantota. So you are looking at
that's why I asked about Hambantota.
Yes, you are looking at direct competition. And will AKD be able to sort of manage this equilibrium or the balance? And if he doesn't, then you are looking back again to political instability, and which Sri Lanka doesn't want. And we have gone through enough. Now there is pragmatic approaches taken by the government, but then you have the General Secretary, Tilvin Silva, making comments like, countries have changed, people have changed, so we have evolved. It's very interesting to see these comments, but then how would the hardliners read this? I know that it is clearly the reformist vote that got them elected, clearly. But would they be able to sort of sustain all these, pressure that is coming in? Now that's a point that I want to highlight. And yeah,
that's interesting. Nirupama, if I can bring you back in, do you think, Nirupama, if I can bring you back in, do you think that India befriending in such a big way the Sinhala majority, drawing closer to AKD, is it a break from the past? Or, I mean, we keep our communication lines open, yes, because we had invited the former mayor of Jaffna and a whole load of Tamil leaders from the north to India for a confab last year. But at the same time, it does feel as if India is sort of pushing to talk to the powers that be in Colombo. Would that be too much of a jump?
Of course, there are they have to talk to the powers that be at Colombo. There's absolutely nothing, wrong with that. But I disagree with the fact that the Tamil issue was not raised. I think both when Anura Kumara Dissanayake visited Delhi and this time, there have been, I think Prime Minister Modi mentioned both times that he hopes that elections will be held and, the relevant constitutional amendments will be implemented. He did not mention the 13th Amendment, but he mentioned these constitutional amendments. So what are those constitutional amendments? There's only one that relates to anything that India is interested in, right? And that is the 13th Amendment. So there are ways and ways of saying this. I don't think he wanted to embarrass his host by bringing up 13th Amendment, because that is a red rag to all of Sri Lanka. And I think Anura Kumara Dissanayake, when he was in Delhi, he persuaded India not to say 13th Amendment. And instead, Prime Minister Modi said in a press conference that, we hope that the elections will be held and the amendment constitutions, the constitution will be implemented. All the amendments in the constitution will be implemented, or some wording to that effect. So that's one thing. But I also want to go back to the Chinese thing, which Dr. Asanga and Dr. Jayatilleka mentioned. Look, I mean, I don't think many people in, the countries in the neighborhood get that we have a real security threat from China. We are the only country in the region that has a land border with China. We've had problems. Yeah. We are the only country. Well, Nepal does, in a sense. And but we have an issue which is live for us. There's been a military standoff. So our we are sensitive, just as Sri Lankans have sensibilities and sensitivities. India too has that, right? And I think that is a red line that we, as the Indian state is not going to take a risk with that anywhere in the neighborhood, which is why you saw India hit back at Bangladesh with that transshipment thing, because Dr. Mohammed Yunus went to the Bao Forum and invited China to do business from Bangladesh with the Indian Northeast. I don't think there was this kind of a reaction even when Pakistani generals visited Dhaka recently, right? So I think India wants to convey its red lines, that these are our security red lines. You cannot have submarines calling at your ports. You cannot have, Dr. Asanga mentioned the wind of the renewable energy projects in the 3 islands. Those 3 islands are really close to Tamil Nadu. I mean, they're really close to the Indian into the maritime boundary, which is why
Delft and Delft and Kachativu and one more.
Nainativu, not Kachativu, Nainativu, Delft and Analyst. And these are very close. So I think there's been an attempt by India to convey that these are our red lines. Please do not give any projects to the Chinese at that. It's so close to us. And of course, Trincomalee, when it is going to be developed into an energy hub or whatever it is, there is of course, when Dr. Jayatilleka says that these were parts of the India-Sri Lanka Accord that were not operationalized, they were not operationalized for very practical reasons. There was a civil war going on in that area, and the minute that ended, or the minute there was a ceasefire, not ended, I'm sorry, in 2002, you had the Americans expressing an interest in that area. And therefore, the Indians then said, okay, we are interested, first rights to us, because that is in the accord. And we had an agreement in 2003, and then we had an agreement thereafter. So there has been a repeated kind of reiteration by India that this is in our, this belongs in our security basket. And please heed that. Listen to us over there. So that is really
that's interesting.
And also this also 1 minute, Neena, just let me complete this thought. The plan to pull in a third country is precisely to address Sri Lankan sensitivities and sensibilities as well. Because
as in the UAE.
As in the UAE, earlier it was Japan, I think it was South Korea at one point, that you involve a third country to allay Sri Lankan fears that, hey, listen, we are not going to take over anything. This is, Japan is your friend, Sri Lanka is your friend, UAE is as much your friend as they are ours. And UAE is, of course, a petroleum and oil giant. So there's some sense to bringing in the UAE. And it is going to make you energy secure, and it is going to make, and it is going to serve as our, energy link as well. So I think all this has to do with security and India's red lines on security. And I think there's been an attempt over the last 20, if not 20, 15 years by India to explain to Sri Lanka that this is what it is. And I don't think, when Sri Lankans criticize India for taking over Sri Lanka, or, they don't appreciate this security aspect, which has become a real live thing for us now, for India now. I don't think they appreciate that as much as we do.
Anyway, we're running out of time. So if I could have concluding remarks, I just want to talk about the fact that, you're dealing also with a very unpredictable US president. I mean, we don't know whether this move by India to widen its strategic sphere of influence has the Trump administration's sort of blessing also, and whether he could flip. I mean, we've got Tabahur Rahana, the terror mastermind of the Mumbai bomb blast, being sent to India for trial, but you also had Marco Rubio calling, the deputy prime minister of Pakistan a few days ago to talk about, counter-terror measures. We've had, the Afghan Taliban returning Bagram Air Base to US. So a lot of things are happening in our region. So I just want to ask this question to you, Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka. What is the broad contours of what is emerging now? It looks like an AUKUS in the Indian Ocean. And is that something that Sri Lanka would be comfortable in due course, once the government is more open about what it's all about?
Right. That's what it looks like, and the Sri Lankans won't be comfortable with that. There's no Sri Lankan administration which did not recognize that Sri Lanka was within India's sphere of influence. Now, a sphere of influence where India is the preponderant external influence is one thing. A sphere of control, management, and possibly even ownership is something else. And I'm afraid the formalization, the very term formalization of existing arrangements, which should have remained as existing arrangements, is going to give the impression that what's a zero-sum game for India is also being turned into a zero-sum game for Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka does not, as a small country, as an island, does not like to be told that certain games are zero-sum. As Dr. Jaishankar told the West must not think that its problems are the world's problems. Similarly, a zero-sum game that India has with China, now we always take that into account. But if all these lights go off at the same go on at the same time, Trincomalee, Mannar, defense, it's going to light up like a Christmas tree. And then the Sri Lankans are going to say, this looks like Indianization. Too many projects running too fast simultaneously. We've never had that kind of overload. And when you do have that kind of overload, an island like Sri Lanka, which is too small to really push back, but too densely populated and a little too big to just be swallowed, is going to look at asymmetric rebalancing. That's what Sri Lanka has always done. And I think that there was a little too much greediness on both sides. On the part of Delhi to have a success and get all this stuff done in one go, and on the part of Anura Kumara Dissanayake, who felt that if he agrees to a broad spectrum of agreement of arrangements, that India will have a vested interest in keeping him afloat. I think it's too much too soon. India should have gone with what has always worked, which is diplomacy and saying, look, guys, we are not really comfortable with the with those wind power things. The Chinese ambassador shouldn't have come to the island and sent off a drone. I mean, Colombo listens. There's nobody in Colombo who doesn't listen. But when it's formalized, then it looks like you're in a cage. And as Sri Lanka proved in the late 80s, it's not easily caged. If an administration locks Sri Lanka in with India, then somebody within the administration, it was Prime Minister Premadasa the last time, or somebody outside, moves to extricate the country from what it feels like too claustrophobic a grip. I believe that's what we're going to see in the next few years.
That's very interesting. Dr. Asanga, if you have concluding remarks?
Yeah, I think India and Sri Lanka needs to get some sort of success in the tripartite agreements, at least some success. Now, the last two agreements which were signed between India, Sri Lanka, as well as the United States on the container terminal, that's been a I mean, it's not happening. The other one is on Matala, India, Russia, and Sri Lanka. So again, that's not happening because of the US sanctions, not to the Russian company, but to the Indian company. So that's also not happening. So all these tripartite, now we signed another tripartite with UAE, Sri Lanka, and India. At least something should work. People should see some sort of tangible benefits that, this is moving forward, rather than, you sign something, you see, I mean, before the Matala agreement, I wrote an article. It's not going to happen. How is it going to happen? Because you need to see some sort of strategic depth before you sign these agreements. And what Nirupama mentioned on the Colombo Security Conclave, those are kind of really good initiative of bringing three countries together, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and India, on security cooperation, on intelligence sharing, which we lack, right? For example, the Easter Sunday, the anniversary is coming in a few days, the 6th anniversary, where we lost more than 250 lives. Better communication channels, better intelligence frameworks. So these are really important. So Sri Lanka should actually look at more than bilateral, multilateral, like regional cooperation.
That's very interesting. That really is. Nirupama, do you have anything to add before we conclude?
No, I'll just say that, I agree that maybe this, piling on too much on the Sri Lankan plate is not going to help either Sri Lanka or India. And there needs to be a recognition from the Indian side as well that, Sri Lanka has these sensitivities, and that there has to be a, a studied approach to these things, rather than kind of, putting it all together and sort of overwhelming a smaller neighbor with so many different agreements that make it feel as if it's being colonized. I agree with that. That's all I have to say.
Well, clearly, Delhi isn't about to let Sri Lanka go the Bangladesh way. That's quite obvious. But whether Sri Lanka will become India's most trusted partner in the region is a big question, because the fact is this Colombo-Beijing tango, had India lose its footing, But whether India and Sri Lanka will be in lockstep is, I think we'll have to wait and see, particularly because we have a young and untested Dissanayake as president. So the opposition leaders, we don't know, and the ruling party may not actually be on the same page in the future, or they could be, we don't know. We'll have to see how it all pans out. Thank you very much, Dr. Jayatilleka, for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Nirupama Subramanian. And thank you, Dr. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, for coming on the show. Thank you, viewers. Do click on the New Indian Express website and click and share Global Express.